Things feel different in the morning. Katara wakes to the sound of breeze in the treetops and a faint tang of salt in the air. The ocean is getting closer, and it smells like home. For several long minutes, she lies still, savoring the salt in the air. Even the bare ground doesn't feel as cold, as unwelcoming. Now that her destination is almost in reach, now that she feels closer to Zuko than ever before, she begins to imagine that she might not have to choose. That maybe she won't have to decide between staying with Zuko and returning to her family alone. Maybe there is a third option. She turns over in search of his sleeping face and instead finds an empty space, his blanket gone. Dread courses through her veins, and she clambers from beneath her blanket in a panic. Zuko can't be gone. He can't. She bursts out of the tent barefoot, hair hanging wild around her face. From his place beside the campfire, Zuko looks up. Katara freezes in place. A sort of softness comes over his face. Not a smile exactly, but close. "Hey," he rasps. She hovers by the tent, heart in her throat. He's still here. An unruly curl falls across her face. Hey. He watches her, golden eyes steady and warm. And she remembers last night, his hand clutching hers like he was afraid to let go. Like she would disappear if he loosened his grip. She lets out a slow breath, willing her pulse back to normal. "Sorry. For a second I thought—" She trails off. It sounds ridiculous now. He's still here. Of course he is. She shakes her head and fumbles to tie her hair back where it belongs. "Never mind. I guess I'm not awake yet." Zuko prods the fire one last time, coaxing the embers to life before he sits back on the log.
"I'd offer to make you some tea, but last time I saw anyone try to do that in the wild, my uncle poisoned himself."
A wry smile tugs at the corner of his mouth. Katara's stomach flutters. It isn't a new sensation, but it almost feels comforting. Things are different. Everything is different than it was a day ago, but that pleasant little flutter hasn't changed. She ties her hair off into a loose knot and rounds the campfire to sit beside him. "Well, in that case, I'll just have to wait until we can buy some real tea. Then you can show off your tea-making skills all you want." His eyes widen, then he looks down, brow furrowing.
"I don't think we're going to have time for that."
"Why not?" She watches the muscles in his jaw work, watches him struggle for words. He tightens his grip on the stick he's been using to stir the fire.
"You said we only had 2 more days."
She turns toward the flames, her face warming. "I said we'd be there in 2 days." Zuko gives a small nod, and he won't meet her eyes.
Did something change?"
Katara swallows. She knows what he means. That they can't stay fugitives forever. That they'll have to choose a path soon, and Katara can't leave the war, her people, behind. But there's more to it than that, and not for the first time, she wishes there was another way. That she didn't have to choose between the familiar and this. Zuko. Their alliance, their partnership, their friendship. She wishes she knew the reason for his hesitation. "No," she answers, voice small. "Or maybe, sort of." She fights to keep the wobble out of her voice. "I just know that I have to get to Chameleon Bay."
"Oh."
There is a catch in his voice, and Zuko pauses. From the corner of her eye, she watches him scratching at the papery bark with his thumbnail.
"When do you want me to leave?"
"I don't." The words come before she can stop them, but she means them. And as they hang in the air between her and Zuko, she can't bring herself to regret them. She wants Zuko by her side. She hears his inhalation, feels his eyes land on her. Her cheeks burn and she doesn't dare look at him. My dad's fleet is at Chameleon Bay, she explains quietly. My brother is there with him. I have to go. But that doesn't mean... She pauses to steady her voice. That doesn't mean that I want to leave you behind. He is quiet, his eyes turned away. For several long moments, Katara wonders if it was the wrong thing to say, if it was too much or too fast. She wishes she could say more, but the words refuse to come. Zuko takes a long, slow breath.
I can't go back to the Fire Nation.
Katara nods. It hurts to think about it. He has nowhere to go, and it's all because he chose to save her.
But
he turns the stick over in his hands, running his thumb across the streaks of soot.
I don't think I can stop fighting.
Katara turns to watch him.
I've been fighting for 3 years to bring an end to the war. But now...
He takes a long, slow breath.
Now I think I might have been standing on the wrong side all along.
His expression is guarded, but she thinks she can see an edge of cautious hope in his eyes. Her breath catches in her throat. Please, please, please say it. I can't do it for you.
Do you think,
Zuko asks, voice tight,
is there any chance I could come with you?
She can hardly remember to breathe. Is that what you want? He meets her eyes for an instant and rubs the back of his neck, his face red.
If you want me to go somewhere else, that's fine too. I'll figure something out.
No! Katara throws her arms around him before he can say anything more. No, Zuko. She pulls him as close as she can. I'd love it if you came with me. He tenses in her arms for the briefest second, then lets out a slow breath. She feels him ease, and one arm comes to rest tentatively around her waist. It isn't much, but it sets off the fluttering in her stomach all the same. Even better, she feels warm and secure tucked against his side like this. Like there was always a place waiting for her in his arms.
Will they be okay with this?
Zuko manages in a half voice.
Do you think your people will really give me a chance?
Katara presses her face into his shoulder and closes her eyes. I'll make sure of it. Now that he knows their destination, the hours, the miles pass quicker. For the first time, Zuko knows exactly where to steer ginseng. He doesn't need to rely on blind panic or directions from Katara. Zuko can't decide whether this new purpose has given the ostrich horse a new burst of energy, or if it is merely twisting his perception of time, but the whole world seems to move faster. Katara leans against his side as they ride. That, he tries to convince himself, is no different than before. Katara has always held on to him like this. She has always pressed herself so close that her grasp could almost be mistaken for an embrace. Except, it feels different now. She tucks her head in alongside his twisted, reddened ear like always, but Zuko feels it differently. He allows himself to soften into it. The soft pressure along the bottom of his scar is no longer a shock. It's a beacon, and Zuko can hardly imagine what he would do without it. If Uncle were here, he would tease Zuko. If Uncle were here, his teasing might even be justified. As they ride, Katara tells him stories. About her people, about her family, about her father. Zuko steers ginseng through forests and meadows and gullies to the easy music of her voice. She tells him how her father used to tell stories every night, casting shadows on the roof of their tent to bring the ancient tales to life. She tells Zuko how she and her brother used to compete to see who could stay up the longest past their bedtime, how their competition was always in vain since their father's quiet rumble could lull them both to sleep in minutes. She tells Zuko how their father took them both fishing and sailing on clear summer days, how he began to teach them to read the currents and the stars. It sounds nice. Her father sounds nice. That terrifies Zuko. A day brings them to the cliffs overlooking the coastline, mere hours from Chameleon Bay. Katara is buoyant, and Zuko does his best to smile along with her. The cool, salty wind takes him back to his years at sea, and for a while it feels like home. He can almost believe that he has found his way back to a destiny he was always meant for. But apprehension creeps up on him no matter how hard he tries to suppress it, to keep it out of sight so it can't spoil Katara's excitement. Zuko knows his own luck. He remembers every time he's ever put his trust in fate, every time it has turned against him. Until now. Sooner or later, a voice in the back of his mind whispers, things will have to go wrong. Being here with Katara feels too good, too right to be true. Katara seems to sense his worry, and she pulls him into a hug. Everything is going to be fine, she assures him. Zuko believes her. Zuko trusts her. He wishes it were as easy to say the same for her family. He scarcely sleeps, staring into the inky dark filling the roof of their tent. Katara's hand rests against his arm as if holding him in place, and Zuko clings to the contact with everything he has. She wants him here, he reminds himself over and over again. She wants him. That has to be enough. Morning comes too soon for his liking, and they set out even before the sun crests the horizon. This near the coast, the terrain is too rugged to safely ride, so they travel on foot, Zuko leading Ginseng by the reins. In Katara's haste to reach the bay, her well of stories runs dry. Zuko tries not to let the silence overpower him. She just wants to see her family, he knows that, and he can't fault her for it. But the breeze through the treetops and the sound of their footsteps do little to fill the silence, and Zuko can't keep his doubts from crowding in and filling the emptiness. He fights the impulse to run. This is where he needs to be right now. Part of him even believes that Uncle would be proud. But that doesn't keep him from tensing in anticipation when they begin their last descent toward the bay. He can feel eyes on them, and he swivels his head to watch for movement in the boulders lining their path. He expects an ambush. He doesn't expect a tall, deep-voiced man to emerge from nowhere behind them and call out Katara's name. She gives a small noise of delight and bounds back up the path. Bato! Zuko feels as though he is shrinking as the flinty blue eyes bore into him, and he steps closer to Ginseng. This is perfect! I was beginning to think that we'd never make it all the way here. Where are Sokka and Dad? Bato hardly reacts to Katara's embrace or her happy chatter, too busy staring at Zuko for anything else. He is unwelcome. Zuko can feel it in the air, in the man's gaze, and he angles his scar away from his scrutiny.
Katara,
Bato interrupts, turning as though to shield her.
Who is this?
Zuko wants to laugh.
I did that too. I tried to protect her. I did protect her. I could have died for her. But his throat is tight, and with the man staring down at him, he is entirely too aware of how small he really is. Katara turns his way, smile as warm as ever. This is Zuko. He forces what he thinks might be a smile and raises a half-hearted hand in greeting. Bato's eyes narrow, and he steers Katara away. What are you thinking, Katara? We can't have him here.
Zuko's jaw tightens, and he grips Ginseng's reins tighter. He's with me. Katara's voice is brittle, and she pulls back towards Zuko, her face hardening. I know what I'm doing, Bato.
We can't have a firebender here. It's too dangerous. You and I both know that Hakoda will agree.
A hard, burning knot grows in his stomach. It isn't the first time he's heard that. But hearing it from one of Katara's own tribesmen, someone who looks enough like her to be family, makes him wonder. He knows she felt that way before. He wonders if it ever really left. Katara's expression turns to stone and her eyes burn cold. I don't know that. And it's not your decision to make. It's Dad's. She turns and pushes past Zuko and Ginseng down the path toward the shoreline. And I'm going to talk to him right now. Zuko has to drag himself to follow. Under Bato's flinty gaze, he feels small. Smaller still when Bato makes it a point to walk half a step behind him. He's known all along that this wouldn't be easy. But he wasn't expecting to feel so much like a prisoner being marched to his own execution. Knowing that none of Katara's tribesmen want him here, not entirely believing that she still does, is almost more than he can take. Every step takes all his discipline, and the walk seems endless. At the beach, warriors work in clusters, some mending nets and sails, some sharpening weapons, some muttering over boiling pots of something that does not smell like food. Zuko hopes it isn't food, at least. Katara marches on ahead, cutting through the crowd without hesitation, her head held high. Zuko pauses long enough to draw a breath, to gather his courage before he follows. He can't look up from the sand, from the trail of Katara's footprints leading across the beach. He sees the blur of brown and blue close in around him. He feels dozens of pairs of eyes turn his way. He is surrounded, outnumbered. The back of his neck prickles and he clenches his jaw. If this is a trap, there is no escape left for him. Bato drags him to a halt halfway across the beach.
You don't go any further.
Zuko jerks free of the man's grasp, but he doesn't dare to disobey. He steps closer to Ginseng, keeping his eyes down. For the first time, Katara turns back. Zuko? He doesn't answer. He isn't certain that he can. There is a weight on his chest and his shoulders that he can't seem to shake off. He wants to trust Katara. He can still feel the brush of her lips against his scar, the softness of her hand in his own, the warmth of her head resting against his. Believing in that, believing in her feels better than anything else he can think of. But here, surrounded by loathing eyes that all look like hers, all of his memories become fragile, little better than illusions. Hatred is real. Hatred is familiar. Zuko, she says again, more insistent this time. He meets her eyes. Trust me. For a moment, the spark in her gaze brings him back to the catacombs, to the trail from Ba Sing Se. Back to when they were alone, relying on one another. A team. Partners, even. For a moment, he can imagine her arms twined around him again and hear her voice in his ear. Everything is going to be fine. He thinks he manages a nod. But then Katara turns away, toward the largest tent on the beach, and reality creeps back in from the corners of his mind. Still rooted in place, too conscious of the watchful, suspicious eyes around him to move, Zuko reaches up to stroke Ginseng's hooked beak.
You'll still be here, right?
He asks the ostrich horse in a whisper.
If Katara can't convince them, or if she changes her mind and I have to leave.
Ginseng gives a small squawk and pecks at his hair. It's stupid, and Zuko can feel the warrior's confused glances, but he keeps petting Ginseng's beak, murmuring a few words here and there to keep himself from bolting. He can't afford to run, not now. Not when any movement could be taken as a threat, not when he is surrounded by so many people who hate him, and especially not while he still clings to a thread of hope that Katara might keep her word, that she might be able to do the impossible. It wouldn't be the first time. Zuko lets out a slow breath and ruffles Ginseng's feathers. He won't count on it. He has enough experience with people to know better than that, but he holds on to her word with everything he has. Even the smallest chance is better than being adrift again. He waits. He doesn't know how long, but the minutes stretch on until some of the warriors lose interest in him and return to their work. Zuko dares to look out at them, only brief moments at first, only enough to see the putrid, bubbling pots raised from the fires and emptied into bulbous leather contraptions, the nets repaired and exchanged for bundles of half-woven rope. The suspicious glances still turn his way from time to time, but they grow less frequent, and the beach goes from tense, eerie silence to a quiet bustle. He waits until even Ginseng tires and plops herself down into the sand and fluffs herself into an enormous, dusty, feathery mass. He waits until only Bato is left to stand guard, and the rest of the warriors seem to forget the intruder in their midst. Zuko shifts his weight and says a silent plea to every spirit he knows. Please don't let this be a trap. Please don't make me lose Katara. When at last the tent flaps open, Zuko feels as though his knees will buckle under the tension. Katara emerges first, then a tall, square-faced man who looks too much like her brother, too much like her to be anyone but her father. Zuko's palms sweat and his heart races, but he doesn't look away. For a long moment, the man stares at Zuko while Katara speaks. Zuko is too far away to hear any of it, then nods, and they both approach. Zuko drops into a bow even before they reach him. Not a proper Water Tribe greeting, he knows that, but he realizes too late that he doesn't know the Water Tribe way. He will learn, he promises himself. If this ends well, he'll ask Katara. He'll learn everything about her people. Hakoda, Bato says in greeting. From the corner of his eye, Zuko sees Katara's father nod. Prince Zuko, Hakoda says, his tone neither welcoming nor threatening. Yes, sir. Zuko remains bowed, eyes on the ground. There is a pause. You can stand, Prince Zuko. We don't do whatever this is in the Southern Tribe. Face burning, Zuko obeys and straightens to find Katara's father staring at him from several paces back. Hakoda looks more like her brother than Katara, but his eyes are every bit as piercing as Katara's. Zuko fights the urge to look away. My children have told me a lot about you. Hakoda pauses as if watching for a reaction. Sokka tells me that you hunted them from the South Pole all the way to the North Pole. Katara tells me the same. Another pause. Is it true? Zuko can't find the words. Mouth dry, he nods. There is no anger in either the chief's eyes or his voice. Every word is calm and measured. Katara told me more. Is that true? Zuko shoots a quick glance at Katara. There are hundreds of stories she could have told her father. So many of them are worse. So many of them are enough to mark him as an unforgivable enemy. Hakoda doesn't wait this time. Is it true that you defended my daughter from your own sister? Zuko stiffens, but Hakoda isn't finished. Is it true that you caught lightning in midair to save Katara? Is it true that you took her to safety when she could go no farther on her own? Zuko can't respond, can hardly even comprehend the questions. It all sounds so much bigger than he remembers. Like there was ever another option. Like he could ever have left Katara at Azula's mercy. He couldn't. It strikes him unexpectedly, but he knows that it's true. He could never have let her die. He could never have left her behind, not after everything she said, after everything she did. When the silence lingers too long, Katara comes to stand beside him. He did, Dad. I wouldn't have made it out of Bossing Say without him.
Zuko manages to shake his head. I couldn't leave you behind. Not after. Hakoda raises a hand to silence him. And, he resumes, tone as even as ever. Now that you're here, Katara tells me that you have a request. For the first time, Zuko thinks he sees a glint of kindness in the chief's eyes. I can't believe it until I hear it from you. Oh. Zuko fumbles for words until Katara's hand brushes against his, and he catches a quick smile from her. He inhales. Sir, I want to see this war end. I always have, and I finally realize that I've been on the wrong side all along. He stops, catches another glimpse of Katara's warm eyes. He can almost feel her fingers laced through his. I want a chance to prove myself. I'd like to join your cause. With your permission, I mean. Hakoda watches him for a long, quiet moment. It takes all of Zuko's will to maintain eye contact. The chief doesn't break the silence, but after a moment, he comes forward and clasps Zuko by the forearm. Clumsily, Zuko returns the gesture. A chance is hardly repayment for my daughter's safety. But if you want it, you can have it. Hakoda smiles and grips his arm a little tighter. Welcome.